So if you've been watching this channel somewhat regularly, you can tell that I've been on a tear about these elected progressives lately because I really think that they've gone from being useless to being an actual obstacle to getting necessary policies, for getting the left movement to take to use direct action, public pressure, the way that we need to get the policies that we need. And they've got us locked in to this failed strategy of electoral politics, or we can get enough elected progressives who don't take corporate money at some undefined amount of election cycles away, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. And then when we have an unspecified number of seats in the House and the Senate and the White House, then we can pass Medicare for all. Then we can pass UBI. Then we can pass all the necessary policies that we need to address the historic wealth inequality and economic devastation in this country. And I've been clear that I think that plan and that whole strategy is divorced from reality, because the economic devastation, the scale of the crisis that we're in, it requires immediate action. We need UBI right now. We need Medicare for all right now. And if we don't get those policies, thousands and thousands, maybe even millions of people will unnecessarily die because of that. And it's unconscionable to everybody just kick their feet up and say, oh, we just got to keep electing some more politicians, even though the ones we've elected have failed completely to actually fight for the policies that we send them to Congress to fight for. And so, like I said, it's one of the main reasons I've been on this tear is to let people know that these politicians, they may talk a good game, they may have all the flowery rhetoric that the left likes in talking about political revolutions and taking on the establishment, busting up the establishment, taking on corrupt corporate interests. They may have all that rhetoric and make you feel good and make you feel like there's some politicians, even though it might be a small number, at least there's some politicians there having knockdown, drag out fights with all the corrupt politicians in Washington who are trying to screw you over. But the reality is, all of these elected progressives, Bernie, AOC, Khanna, Pramila Jayapal, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, once they're in Congress, once they're part of these institutions, it's clear that they aren't trying to rock the boat. They aren't doing a hostile takeover of the Democratic Party. They aren't trying to force the hand of these politicians to do the policies that they want, that we sent them there to fight for. Their strategy is, oh, we'll just work within the system, we'll do some tweaks around the edges, and this whole barbaric and corrupt system that is leading to the deaths of millions of people unnecessarily. Yeah, I mean, what can you do? We can't just completely overthrow everything. So let's just work with these corrupt politicians, and we'll get the best that we can get, and we'll give you guys crumbs and scraps, and you're gonna have to take that and you're gonna have to accept that because that's the best we can get. And that's very different. That mindset, that approach, that theory of change, as some will call it, is very different from the mythology that a lot of people on the left have created around these politicians. And it is really, there is such a divide there that when you actually get into what these politicians are saying, it's nowhere near what we think, or what some people on the left think they actually believe in, what they're actually doing to fight in Congress. And so this brings me to the topic of this video. Briahna Joy Gray, host of Bad Faith Podcast, which is easily one of my favorite podcasts that are out now. She has done great work advocating for the actual left and trying to hold these elected progressives accountable, even though very few in left media are actually doing this. So a world of credit to Briahna Joy Gray. And I've done a lot of commentary on some of the interviews and conversations that she's had on her show. And it isn't even really like a deliberate effort. It's just she is making the points, and she is getting these people on the record. And like, it is like, the content is, it speaks for itself, and it needs to be discussed. So that's why I've talked about it, her and her show so much on the show recently. So she had Khanna on, Justice Democrat, one of these so-called elected progressives in Congress, and asked him a bunch of different, had a conversation on a bunch of different topics. But the one I want to talk about here today is, she asked him about whether or not he's a socialist, and his answer was really, really bad. And basically, you know, defending capitalism. He was even at one point defending the existence of billionaires, which is indefensible. And I don't know how anybody on the left who calls himself even a social democrat can defend the existence of billionaires. And again, this is supposed to be somebody who was like a leading figure on the left. He was one of Bernie Sanders' co-chairs. He's a Justice Democrat, one of the few Justice Democrats in Congress, and the few people who don't take corporate money. And this is supposed to be the furthest left in Congress right now. And he was literally defending capitalism. While we are living in failed state capitalism, this is end stage capitalism that we're witnessing in this country right now. And he still comes out defending it. So it was so bizarre, and it was so out of touch that I just had to talk about it. And it just raises questions, because what we all saw happen over the last year, to anybody paying attention, anybody involved in politics, that should have radicalized you. That should have radically shifted your economic ideology from where you were pre-COVID to where you are now. And if you still haven't figured out like exactly where you fall as a socialist, democratic socialist, communist, or anarchist, you don't know exactly where you fall, but you know that after we saw what we saw, and how in the middle of an emergency, the government, who's supposed to be there to serve the public, decided to screw over the public and do a corporate heist and gratuitously give a blank check to corporations and the richest people in the country, and then leave us for dead with a means-tested $1,200 check that was supposed to last us an entire year. Once we saw how that happened, once we saw how they let small businesses fail, and it was not even a question whether or not they were going to bail out and prop up the largest corporations in this country, the ones that were most capable of weathering the storm. When we saw that, it's so clear that this idea of a free market and a meritocracy, all of that is a scam. All of that is just a fraud to make people believe that the system is fair, so that people aren't as outraged at it as they should be. So once you saw that, if you were paying attention, that should have radically changed the way you view our economic system and capitalism in general. So for a sitting member of Congress, one of the people who are supposed to be the left, the most left in Congress, to see them not, their perspective not keep up with the moment, and for them to just be like completely unmoved by the events over the last year, it is inexcusable. So I have two clips to show you. The first is him defending capitalism, and then the second is him defending billionaires. So I have two clips to show you. But first, you already know the deal. If you're able to contribute to the show, I have a link to Patreon and the About page of the YouTube channel. You can sign up and do different monthly subscriptions for $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month. I think I have like $15 a month. And I don't post Patreon exclusive content because I want everybody to have access to this content, regardless if you can pay or not. So I'm grateful for all the people who do sign up for Patreon. And you have monthly subscriptions, because that it really does help out the show, and it's some sort of reliable income that I can try to work with. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. Also, if you feel more comfortable doing one-time contribution through PayPal, I'm also incredibly grateful for that. The links to PayPal is in the about page of the YouTube channel. And thank you for all the people who have contributed over the last few months. And thank you for all the people who keep showing up, watching the videos, leaving the comments. You guys make the show as successful as it is, and hopefully you can keep growing it to be even more successful so that we can reach even more people. So now I'm going to play the clip, the first clip, and then we're going to come back and break it down.
In 2020, endorsed a socialist for president. Are you a socialist?
No, I'm not. I call myself a progressive capitalist, but I don't think Bernie's a socialist either. I think Bernie is more a social democrat, but he's obviously affiliated. I view him as a Scandinavian in the Scandinavian model.
Oh, that's a democratic socialist. What about the label socialist do you feel like presents a break with what your personal ideology is? Why aren't you a socialist?
That's a great question. I don't think I don't think the government should run Apple computers or ExxonMobil station. I mean, I don't think the government should own the means of production in an economy.
Should the workers of Apple Computer run Apple computers?
I think the workers should be represented by corporate boards. I think the workers should have more protections and more of a say. But I don't believe that there has to be always collective ownership of all of the means of production, because I think that doesn't allow for people to go out and invent new things and defy collective judgment. So I come out where sort of a Marcus Sen is, which was an economist, progressive economist, and he says, look, markets are necessary in his view, but we need to have markets well regulated, and we have to have fundamental investments in education and healthcare so everyone has a chance to do it.
But the markets, in your mind, the markets still have to be determinant here. They still have to be at the core of what's driving the major economic decisions.
Well, anytime you have a transaction, that's a market, right? So the question is, we have rigged markets where there's been rent-seeking behavior? Yes. Where people have tried, but where you haven't had fairness. So the workers have been exploited. Financial industries have exploited the system, as we just saw recently with GameStop. But I don't think that. But I do believe in markets that are well functioning and well functioning, well regulated, free enterprise with investment in people having the right to education. Healthcare is probably where I come out.
I mean, there is a concept of market socialism. I don't think that anyone, seriously believing in the idea of a socialized economy or planned economy is categorically opposed to the use of markets to do certain things like set prices and manage supply and demand, things of that nature. But you mentioned rent seeking, which in my mind adheres to the capitalist system. So what is the non-rent seeking aspect of market capitalism?
Well, production. I mean, you have people who are making things and inventing things and creating value. I mean, I don't think every economic activity is just trying to compete for your share of the pie. I think there are a lot of people who are entrepreneurs or business leaders who are doing things that are adding value. As simple as writing a book or producing a movie or producing a podcast or producing a car. I mean, I think that there's a lot of productive activity. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of non-productive activity where people may be just trying to take the pie and get their share of it. And that's what I would describe as rent seeking. Of course, not my theory. I mean, there are economists who agree about that.
But isn't it that rent seeking, that profit motive, precisely what is supposed to create value in a capitalist system?
No, I think what's supposed to create value is I don't have a problem with the profit motive. If someone writes a brilliant book, or someone writes a brilliant, if Lin-Manuel Miranda makes Hamilton and wants to make millions of dollars, I have no problem with that. But
I'm a communist now. You brought Hamilton in it, and it just made me go full commie. Just kidding.
Yeah. So I don't have a problem with. I thought the attacks of Bernie Sanders, you made millions of dollars in your books. I had no problem with that. I mean, I thought it was ridiculous. So I don't have a problem with productive value adding. And then the question becomes, well, how do you distinguish between what is productive value adding and what is rent seeking? And obviously there's a level of judgment, but I think most Americans would agree that there's a lot of activity in our economy right now that isn't productive value added or that is exploitive of working and middle class Americans. And that's what needs to be.
Let's get to the first point that he makes, which is really such a lazy argument. And I don't think the government should own the means of production because I don't think that they should have a say in creating Apple products. And he even said, I don't think that the government should own ExxonMobil gas stations. So I'm going to back up to the Apple argument later in a little bit. First, let me address the Exxon thing. You don't think we should nationalize the energy industry? Are you telling me somebody who was a co-chair of Bernie Sanders' campaign, who had introduced his Green New Deal legislation, or had written this Green New Deal legislation that called for nationalizing the energy industry? You don't think that we should nationalize it? And why not? He says that he doesn't agree with the government owning means of production for creative purposes. what creativity, what innovation is Exxon bringing to the energy industry? They're destroying the fucking planet. So, according to Roe, let's continue to let Exxon destroy the planet, and for something creativity. And I don't think the government should nationalize it. And another part of the nationalizing the energy industry, it is one of those things like healthcare that it should not be up to how much you can pay whether or not you get the service. Those are necessities. Energy in this country is a necessity. Healthcare is a necessity. So to leave it all up, to leave that in the hands, that entire industry, multi-billion-dollar industry, in the hands of corporations so that they can basically decide, they can shape our energy policy in this country, it is so silly and it's so destructive because we already seen what it's led to, this disastrous climate crisis. So for the climate crisis alone, we need to nationalize the industry because all of this trying to regulate them, trying to incentivize them to move to green technology, that is not meeting the moment. If we continue on that path, we will be living, we already are kind of in the beginning stages of a climate apocalypse, but we will cement that and cement the complete destruction of our environment if that's the path we go down. So for the climate crisis alone, we should nationalize the energy industry, but also it makes it more efficient because the profit motive isn't interfering with best practices like we're seeing in Texas. The reason why they had massive blackouts across the state is because the energy companies run, they have, it's like a laissez-faire approach to the energy industry in Texas. They run the show. So even though it would have been safer, it would have been better for the people of Texas if they winterized the equipment that they use in the energy industry, so that they're prepared for what strong winter storms like that they recently had. Even though that would have been in the best interest of the customers and the people in the state who rely on that energy for their survival. The companies said because it costs less, it would cost them less money to not winterize it, they decided to cut that corner. And because of that, it led to catastrophe. It led to calamity. So things like that, like I said, necessities, they should not be left up to corporations to decide. Because at the end of the day, all they're concerned about is not providing a best service and improving society. All they're concerned about is their bottom line. So that was a weird one. And then the whole, I don't agree with that because I'm not a socialist, because I don't think the government should own the means of production, and it would eliminate creativity and something Apple products. Basically, like making the case that we need to keep this clearly failed economic system in place because something Apple products. That makes absolutely no sense, and it's such a lazy, not even thought out argument because there are different levels to it. I'm not a communist. I don't think that the government should own every single industry. I think that the necessities need to be like the parts that are essential to human existence. Those should be off the table. Energy, healthcare, education, those should be nationalized in my opinion. Mostly education, I guess you can have some private institutions, but it should mostly be nationalized. The Apple products argument, so there are different levels to it. You can have, myself, before the COVID started and this economic crisis started, I would consider myself a social democrat. I couldn't see how we would get from where we are now, from where we were back then, to a place where it was workers own the means of production and things like that. I couldn't see how that was going to happen. So my idea was, okay, let's do the social democratic approach. After all of this, I'm at the very least a democratic socialist, and that means that I support workers owning the means of production, or having a say in management of the company, having partial ownership in the company, because one, it addresses the exploitation, and it kind of eliminates it, because we've seen since this started how workers are just disposable, and their companies that they work for, that they dedicate their waking existence to propping up, will leave them for dead and do absolutely nothing to help them, even in the middle of an emergency. How many of these frontline workers have been working, putting their lives on the line, working in the middle of a pandemic, and gotten absolutely no pay raise, even in industries where the profits for the company is through the roof, like Amazon. They did this little pay raise for like a couple of weeks, and then they immediately took it away, and they're basically working at the same wages. All while they're doing that, Jeff Bezos has basically doubled his wealth. Billionaire, damn near doubled his wealth since it started. So if workers had a say in the management of the company, there's no way that shit would happen. There's no way. There's no way that there'd be some type of meeting about what we're doing with the profits and the benefits that are being provided to the workers. There's no way that if the workers had a seat at that table and they had actual say in management, there's no way that they would come to the conclusion, oh, it's fine, pay us whatever you were paying us before, let Jeff Bezos double his wealth, and we'll do whatever we can, we'll catch COVID, we'll let it spread uncontrolled in Amazon warehouses like they did, and we'll do it for the same wages, we'll risk our lives for the same shitty wages that we were working for before. No workers would go with that. So the democratic socialist approach of having the workers have a say in the production or say in management, it is crucial to avoid the exploitation that we're seeing. And also, that's the only way I can think of. It's one of the most effective ways I can think of to address the wealth inequality. Because, like I said, the billionaires, the millionaires, damn near doubled their wealth since all this happened. And they have completely reshaped the economy. They've gutted small businesses. 60% of the small businesses that had to close because of COVID are closed permanently. So the wealth inequality before this was already historic. It was already worse than it's ever been in human history. So now it's exacerbated and they've multiplied that. So there needs to be some leveling of the playing field. And that's not saying that the CEO needs to make the same exact salary as somebody who's working in the warehouse, but the giant gap, this giant disparity, that cannot exist anymore. And when workers have partial ownership in the business, they're entitled to some of the profits. And it's not like, oh, you're just stealing all the CEO's money and just giving it out to the workers. No, the CEO, it is impossible for Jeff Bezos to make billions of dollars a year if it wasn't for his Amazon workers. That is just impossible. There's no way he could make that money on his own. So they are essential to the production of this giant sum of wealth. So they should be entitled to a certain portion of it. So once you give them partial ownership, then you start to split the profit among the working class, and it immediately addresses the wealth inequality. So that's one reason why I support that. But now also to this general idea, this lazy ass idea of I support it because creativity or something like that, Apple products. Nobody's saying that, again, nobody's making the argument, let's all be communists and let's let the government own it. Well, I'm not saying that. I don't think that is a reasonable thing. Let the government own everything, because look how corrupt the government is now. And if you're going to tell me we're going to just let the most powerful people who are running the country, let them decide how much everybody makes, and we're supposed to trust that they're distributing the wealth evenly. I will never, ever have that much faith in human beings. So I do think that there needs to be some level of disconnection from the government. But that's why I think that the best solution to that is to have the workers, the people who are invested in the company, have partial ownership of the company. But just the whole idea of, oh, if we go that route, that means there's never any Apple products or anything like that. First of all, it is such a weird argument to make, because you're essentially saying, as destructive and exploitative as this so-called capitalism, and it's really not capitalism that we live in, this is crony capitalism. This is the government has a very big role in managing the economy, because they will give blank checks and multi-billion-dollar, multi-trillion-dollar bailouts to the corporations that they choose, so that under no circumstances they can ever fail. So if you have a situation where an economy where there are certain, the elites can never fail under any circumstances, then if they do, the government will come and bail them out, and then when they're not failing, they get to hoard all the wealth. That's not capitalism. That's not any type of free market. That's an oligarchy. So you're going to say that all of the worst aspects, the most destructive aspects of the capitalism, the climate catastrophe, the endless wars, the wars that are waged for the profit of corporations, that's capitalism. That's all part of the system. The privatizing of necessary government services like education, and the obscenity of our corrupt for-profit private health insurance industry. You're going to say all of that is okay because Apple products. That makes absolutely no sense. And then further on into that argument, you can have some level, like this, the economic model that I think we should move toward, it doesn't eliminate creativity. You can still have creativity. And you just have to have the people who are working for a company, the people who are investing their lives and their best years of their lives, and they're waking almost all their waking time to the company. They have to have a say. They have to have some say in the direction of the company, at the very least, in how the workers are treated, the benefits that they have, the hours that they work, the wages that they get. They have to have some say in that. And that's not to say that as soon as you, the way I view it, it's not to say as soon as you have employees, that means their say is equal to yours in the direction of the company, in the direction or in the products that you make. I don't agree with that. I think that ultimately the executive, the head of the company, they decide what products are made. They decide just the general direction and the creativity of the company, and the workers decide the process, how, and what is acceptable for them, their part in the company. So this whole idea, it really is a straw man that, the second you get that, say goodbye to any creativity. I just don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. And here's the thing, why it pisses me off so much, because it's so lazy. And you can tell that that's just like a go-to answer for him. And he doesn't really put any thought into it. Because if he really did care, if he was really offended and outraged by how barbaric and brutal our economic system is, there's no way you can just say, oh, it's okay, but let's just make it a little bit better. No, you would see that, okay, maybe this socialist thing is a lot better than what we have, but maybe I don't agree with it all the way. So let me find the improvements that I can make to it, and make it so that I think it's more optimal, and it benefits the creatives, and it also benefits the workers. You can do that. You can do that. It's not like some wholesale thing. You take it or you leave it. No, you can definitely as a politician, You can craft the economic system, tailor make it in a way that you think is most productive. But just say, oh no, the capitalism is just fine. Let's just leave it the way it is, and definitely not do the socialism thing because something Apple products. That is so lazy. It is so generic. And again, it's so divorced from the reality and what this moment calls for that it's a damn shame that an elected politician is making these arguments. And then, so Virgil Texas, co-host of Bad Faith, he kind of follows up with Khanna and starts asking him, okay, so you said that you aren't in favor of the rent-seeking behaviors in capitalism, but that's really all capitalism is in the United States. Definitely in the United States. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, rent-seeking behavior is the most simple way I can explain it is you are making money from the wealth that you already have. It's not that you're creating a product or providing a service and you're getting money from that. Just simply the fact that you have wealth and you have assets, you're using that to multiply your wealth and make even more money. A good example of that is landlords. They own the property and they rent it to their tenants, but it's not like the landlord is making a product and then the tenant is buying a product. It's not like the landlord is really providing a service. They just simply, because of the fact that they had the capital, they had the money to purchase a property, now they're going to rent the property and they're going to multiply their money. They're going to make money simply from the fact that they had wealth to begin with. That's rent-seeking behavior. And Roe is trying to, this is where I feel it gets incredibly disingenuous, because he's acting as if that isn't our entire economy, as if we don't have this consumption, this consumer-based economy with just needless spending in the economy. He's acting as if every business, or at least the majority of business, they're providing a necessary, or they're providing a product, a service that is that people need, that people want, and therefore they're getting money from that. But that's not exactly how the system works. Prime examples of that is like Wall Street and the financial industry. What service are they providing to the public? What service? Just go by the 2008 crash alone. They were scamming the entire industry on the whole. It was their business model. Fraud was their business model, to rip off their customers, rip off their clients, put them in these houses that they couldn't afford, give them these mortgages that they know they would never be able to pay back. And inevitably, they were betting on them to default on these loans and get evicted. And when they did, they would turn around and make money off of that. What service what was Wall Street and the financial institutions providing to the public? It is a multi-billion-dollar industry. They do, every year they do trillions of dollars in trading in the stock market. And what service is that providing to anybody? What product are they providing to anybody? Look at Wall Street, the whole thing with Wall Street bets and the GameStop stocks. It exposed something that was already clear, that some people who follow this thing closely were already aware of, which is that there is an entire industry of people who, largely billionaires and millionaires, who do pump and dump schemes. They artificially raise the prices of a certain stock for a company, and once it gets to a certain point, they sell off the stock and they bankrupt the company. Or they short sell, which what they were doing with GameStop, where they would be betting, in the simple version of it, they're betting against the company. They're betting on a company's stock to plummet, and they're betting on the company to fail. And then once that company fails, once it goes bankrupt, and once they lay off all their workers, they make an insane amount of profit off of that initial bet that the company was going to fail and the stock was going to fail. And then they become invested in the failure of those companies. So they go out of their way to put those companies out of business so that they can make a bunch of money on shorting their stock. There's a whole multi-billion-dollar industry in this country specifically geared to doing that. So how is that not rent-seeking behavior? And that's just one industry, but that's one of the most profitable and most powerful industries in this country. And it is entirely rent-seeking behavior. At all points, when you put your money in the bank, they don't even, before decades and decades ago, you would at least get some type of they would pay you dividends for putting your money in the bank because they use that money to make loans. And you would get some sort of interest from just putting your money in there. So it was like a mutual relationship. Now you put your money in the bank, they use that money, your money, to make more loans that they profit off of, and they don't give you anything for it. And in fact, they charge you a bunch of fees and overdraft fees and all these other unnecessary charges to just bilk you at every step of the way. How is that entire industry, again, one of the biggest industries in the entire country, in the entire economy, how is that not entirely rent-seeking behavior? For Ro Khanna to pretend like our economy is this bastion of entrepreneurship and creativity, and almost all of the behaviors in the economy are providing a product or a service, and that's why capitalism is so great. That is such bullshit, and it really comes off as disingenuous. And I feel like there's no way he actually believes that bullshit. So the next clip that I'm going to show you, Ro Khanna is asked about whether or not he thinks billionaires should exist, and again, lackluster, generic, lazy ass answer. And so I'm going to play the clip and I'll come back and break it down.
Moving on to another line of questioning. I caught an interview that you did a couple years ago, I think it was 2019, where you were asked, should billionaires exist? This is a question that was asked of the Democratic presidential candidates, and you said yes. And since then, over the course of this pandemic, going on a year now, and the economic collapse, we're in a time where, in real terms, unemployment is approximately where it was at the height of the late 2000s, early 2010s recession. And during this period of widespread privation, Jeff Bezos, for instance, has increased his wealth by a multiple, as have many other billionaires. So I want to ask you again, has that changed your mind? Do you still believe billionaires should exist?
I don't think the government should outlaw billionaires. I think we should have a significant wealth tax. I mean, I think, the great thing with the United States, they're developing countries where you have to choose between innovation, wealth creation, and equity. They don't have enough resources to be able to provide everyone with food, water, basic healthcare, and education. The amazing thing with the United States is we can do both. We can actually have extraordinary wealth generation, wealth creation, and provide everyone with food, provide everyone with basic education and healthcare. We just choose not to. So what I would say is I have no problem personally, and I know others have a disagreement with someone having an aspiration of becoming a billionaire, but then I would have a wealth tax on that billions, and I'd use that money to pay for everyone having education, healthcare, basic housing.
It feels right to say, okay, there's no trade-off between people being able to have enormous aggregation of wealth and become billionaires and providing for people if you just tax them. But one of the concerns of the founding fathers, one of the concerns of folks is that if people are that affluent, that they can have an impact on our democracy, that we have an oligarchy, that we have people like Michael Bloomberg who can enter a presidential race and get on the board just because he has enough wealth to spend as much as everybody else out of his own pocket, as much as everybody else has earned. And there's a relationship, right, between the growing number of billionaires and growing income inequality. The number of billionaires grew more than ninefold between 1990 and March of 2020. And we all know, as Virgil mentioned, that the wealth of those billionaires has grown even more in the course of the COVID pandemic. So do you think there's a relationship between income inequality and the existence of billionaires?
I think if the point is, do I think that there's a relationship between billionaires, income inequality, and political inequality, I would say yes. I mean, if the point is that having these billionaires gives them disproportionate voice in our democracy, and that's unhealthy for our democracy and makes it harder to have progressive policy, I think that's undoubtedly true. And I guess what I would say is that's why we need to ban having this kind of money, unlimited money in politics, and why I've proposed democracy dollars, which would make every voter give everyone $50 to spend on political campaigns.
Like a candidate-style system.
Public financing, but actually constitutional under this court. So I think there are ways to limit that influence. But right now, you do have that influence. Now, I think where my view falls short, candidly, where my defense of billionaires are maybe 100 years when historians judge this and say, what Khanna was talking about, you could tax billionaires on a wealth tax and you can help build America, is the fact that 2 billion people around the world live on less than $1 a day, and probably all of us will be judged somewhat harshly in terms of the inequality on a global scale.
So at first he comes up with this. He gives this answer again that's completely divorced from the reality of how our economy actually works, and he pretends like, oh, there's no problem with, a billionaire. If somebody wants to be a billionaire, that's just fine. We could tax them more. We can raise their taxes. But hey, I fundamentally don't have a problem with billionaires existing. We have enough money in this country. We print money so we can have services for everybody, and we can have billionaires. We can have everybody. We can address wealth inequality and have billionaires. But it was silly on his face, and I love that Briahna followed up on that and brings adds the necessary context that no, it's not as the picture isn't as rosy and harmless as you're painting it out to be, because there's a direct correlation between the historic, unprecedented wealth inequality that we're experiencing right now and the rise of billionaires and the mega rich, the ultra rich. There's a direct correlation between that. There's a direct correlation between the workers working in living with wage slavery, getting paid less than they need to survive. There's a correlation between that and the giant disparity in the worker, the CEO to worker pay ratio. There is a direct correlation between that. So it's people act like Khanna is acting like in this clip. He's acting as if there's an infinite amount of money, and somebody being a billionaire doesn't inherently affect everybody else. That is objectively not true. The only reason why they have that much money, that obscene amount of wealth, is because they stole it. Jeff Bezos didn't work so hard that he has over $100 billion worth of wealth. He is not that productive. What he did was he started a business, and then once he had employees who were multiplying the productivity and the earnings of the business, he took it all for himself and gave them less than they needed to survive. So he stole the wealth of all of his employees, stole and all the wealth that the company that they helped create has generated. He took it all for himself, and now he's the richest person on the planet. That isn't because he worked harder for anybody. So there is a finite amount of money, and when you do have billionaires, they are taking that money from the people are lower on the economic scale. That is a fact. And it was also this study years ago that showed billions of dollars in wage theft that across industries in this country. So every year, executives steal billions of dollars in overtime or just docking pay and stuff like that. Steal billions of dollars in wealth from their employees. That's how you become a billionaire. And then also another great point that Briahna makes was just the fact that they exist is just by definition destabilizing to the economy and to the country. Because once you have that amount of wealth, there is nothing that you can't do. There is nothing that with all that money that you can't do. And by the way, let's put into context what $1 billion actually is. To have $1 billion, that means you had to have $1 million 1,000 times. That is so obscene. And you cannot even spend that in your lifetime, even if you try. To have $1 million 1,000 times. So, and that's just to have $1 billion. Jeff Bezos has over $100 billion. So, there is no justifying that. And I'm not a communist. I'm not saying everybody should make $20,000 a year. It doesn't matter what your job is. It doesn't matter what you do. Everybody should make the same exact amount. No, I don't agree with that. But this level of this giant wealth gap is absurd and it's obscene. Again, there's nothing that they cannot do. They can get whatever, they can rig the system so that it is the way it is now, And under no circumstances can they ever fail, because they can run their business into the ground, and they know that the second they need a bailout, they can go to the government, just like they did in 2008, just like they did after COVID, and say, hey, if these companies go under, it's going to take the entire economy down with it. So yeah, I know we've made billions of dollars over the last couple of years, and I myself have taken billions of dollars in profit, and I didn't invest, I didn't save for the event of a possible pandemic. I didn't save for the possibility that our company goes through a downturn. But here we are. If you don't bail us out, we're going to take the entire economy with us. And so they do that, and then they bribe the politicians, and the politicians are there to serve them at any cost. So once you have that amount of wealth, it is, like I said, there's nothing you can't do. And you become more powerful. You get to own the government, which is what happened now. We have this corporate capture of government. The billionaires, the mega rich, the ultra rich, the millionaires, they have bought the politicians. So now, instead of serving the public, which is the entire purpose of government, they are there almost exclusively to serve the interests of their corporate donors and to serve the interests of the billionaires and millionaires who fund their campaigns and who give them jobs and help them out in the revolving door of politics. So it is inherently destabilizing to the economy. It's destabilizing to democracy for billionaires to exist. And I don't get how people don't understand that. Like this, it's wild to me. So Khanna's answers here, lackluster to say the least. Out here defending capitalism, failed state capitalism that we're experiencing here in the United States, and defending the existence of billionaires while we live in while wealth inequality is worse than it was during the Gilded Age. It's worse than it's ever been in human existence. And he's still going to defend people having obscene amounts of wealth while 60 million people lost their jobs, 40 million people are about to be evicted. Khanna is going to tell you that, oh, it's okay for billionaires to exist, and it's okay for them that they damn near doubled their wealth during all this because money's not infinite, and them having billions of dollars, it doesn't affect you, even though it actually does. So pathetic. And this goes to show you, this is the mindset of these elected progressives. You think that they're in Congress having knockdown, drag out fights for at the least social democratic reforms, or like Bernie calls himself, democratic socialists, looking for democratic socialist reforms, trying to bust up the establishment. They aren't doing that at all. They've accepted that the system is a system, and they're just going to try to make it less barbaric and less brutal. And that's just what they're doing. Operating within the system and making mild tweaks to this disastrous, failed neoliberal experiment.